Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Ponderama this month. I am here to surprise you a little bit. Normally, we would be doing a Ponderama on the guest that I just had a conversation with a few weeks ago. That would be Anne-Laure Lecomte of the Tiny Experiments book. But no, that's not happening today because a couple of things. I just love the timing of things, right? So I interviewed Anne and interviewed her early, and we ended up dropping the episode for her. And then May happened, and I was very busy in May and end of April too. And then I woke up today and I was like, oh my God, we never did an Anne-Laure Lecomte Ponderama because I was in a panic because I was suddenly going to record another guest, which I did record today and you'll hear soon. So I was like, oh shit, I did something wrong. Oh no. And then I took a deep breath and said, no. Right on time. Right on time. What's happening is right on time. Because two things, one of which is I have not revisited the Tiny Experiments book or my conversation with Anne-Laure because I know that later this year in the fall, I'm going to be offering to my clients and to the public to join us too, of course, a little 3-day weekend where we're going to create our own tiny experiments for the fall. And so I knew that was happening. And this is actually going to work out great because then I can do a Ponderama about that later on in the summer and let that stand on its own, which will be good. And plus I'll be able to talk a little bit about how I'm going to approach it, how it's this, how I'm going to use the foundation of her work and yet I'm going to make it a Humans on the Verge experience and more of a depth psychology experience, just like we do with all of our retreats. So that worked out fine. And then I thought, oh, what will I talk about? And then I'm like, oh, I'm going to talk about the very thing that I am going through right now, which, as you can tell by the title of this episode, is an identity, quote unquote, crisis. And yes, I just made those little quote things that you do with your fingers. And the reason I'm quote unquoting the word crisis is because, the only thing that's in crisis when we are questioning our identity, which is how we show up in the world, the only thing that's having any angst about it is the ego. And thus is why it is called an identity crisis in the psychological therapy world, because it feels like a crisis. It feels like a holy shit moment for our sense of ourself, because our identity is kind of the little costume we put on to move out around the world. And so this identity, quote unquote, crisis has come to a head for me and also moved through it. Like I've been in it for about 3 years. And really the last 6 or 7 weeks, definitely the last 6 months, but definitely the last year, I've been in it. I've been in it on some level. Mostly this shift in my identity is coming from a bunch of different things. One of which is my age. I'm turning 62 in the middle of June. Also, I'm coming to the end of like a 7-year cycle, and I find these kind of cycles in my life kind of last that long, that not perfectly in any way, but what do they say? All of your cells are replaced every 7 years or something like that. I've been In 2018, I woke up and, which is just, first of all, I just want to say, how was 2018 7 years ago? I feel like it's like 10 minutes ago. I mean, clearly the pandemic so fucked with our sense of time. And it was only 2 years into my little new sense of self, starting in 2018, that the pandemic hit. So yeah, it's like the last 5 years are a blur. But in 2018, I did two major things in my life. And they kind of were polar opposites, but they were things that I needed to do at that time. I woke up that year and I was thinking, I'm going to be 55 this year. And I'd never gotten into kind of what they call in Buddhism right relationship with my ability to make money. I'd made money in my life, but it was always this hate relationship with commerce and capitalism and the marketplace and all of that kind of stuff. And I mean, as you know, I was pretty much raised by a person who enjoyed the American dream, but was basically an anti-capitalist. Not completely. I mean, that's the thing. It's not that black and white, right? There is something important about meritocracy, and there is something important about being rewarded for your work. But, greed, really. I was taught a lot about greedy people in the world and how it upsets the world's kind of rightful order. So I knew at 55, I just needed to make some money. And plus my book had been out for a few years and I'd finished with my solo show, and I'd been in this real creative period in my life from 2008 to about 2015 when my book came out, another 7-year cycle there. And it was kind of over. That arc was over, and I didn't know what to do. And I tried to write a second book, and I tried to get a book deal. And I've talked about this before. I don't know if I've talked about it on here. And it just didn't work out. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to lean back into actually what I do know how to do, and that I got my master's in, which is helping people transform their lives and working with them in a deep way. So I built a business, and I hired this most amazing, truly, truly amazing business coach. Her name is Melissa McFarlane, and she's got a business called Creative Successful Entrepreneurs, and she works with creatives. She is a creative. She's an actor and a writer, but she's also got this great kind of business mind. And so I decided to work with her and change my life, change my relationship with money, change my relationship with understanding how to build a business, how to be an adult. I did a lot of adulting. It was a course of adulting is what it was. It made me stretch into places within myself that I never really had to, because I was a spoiled West LA privileged daughter. Completely admit it. If you read my memoir, Carlin Home Companion, you know it. And it was a lovely life to have, but it didn't give me certain basic skills. And I know my dad always felt very torn about that, but my dad was a codependent like I was, and so we had that dance. So in 2018, I signed up with her and immediately built a very successful business and learned how to bring in money that I never thought I could, and how to attract the kind of people that I wanted to work with and all of that. But I also fell into kind of that world in some ways, like buying into all of that world. The other part of me in that year, also almost the same month, began doing the dream tending work with Stephen Eisenstadt. And as you know from having Stephen on this podcast, you know a little bit about him and his work. And that is the depth psychology work that I'm trained in. And as you know from some of my other guests here, when I talk about the deep imagination or the Jungian stuff, the transcendent function, my spiritual life and all of that, this is an important part of who I am. And yet I have to say, there's always been a part of me that keeps one foot out of it, doesn't quite go all the way in. And this is where my identity, quote unquote, crisis came in the last few years, is that I was enjoying getting to work with people in a deep way. I was certainly enjoying having a stable, consistent income. But there was some part of me that began to become restless. That's the only way I can really say it. And that's the artist in me. That's the creative in me. My writer self was longing to come forward and really be front and center again. And so I kept picking, every year I pick a stand for the year. It's some of the work I do with Melissa. And it kept being like, artist in the center, or artist first, or creativity first. And so that meant entrepreneur second, right? And I knew it was my soul calling. And I know I'm here to communicate and write. And doing this podcast is part of how I write out loud, basically, as I am today. I'm got some notes here, but I'm pretty much just off the top of my head here, and as I usually am for the Ponderama. So this was terrifying, because being an artist is the world doesn't really, there's very few artists who make a living where they can just survive, let alone flourish, let alone, those superstars that there are out there. And of course, I grew up in the shadow of someone who did very well, struggled with money, not because he didn't make a lot, but because he didn't handle it well at some points, as you guys know from his book and my book. So I, and having come through my solo show phase and my book writing that I did, I didn't make any money as a solo show artist. There's no money in solo show artists, unless you're Billy Crystal or John Leguizamo or someone like that. And writing a book, I got paid a nice sum of money, 5 figures, but that lasts only how long as it lasts. And I put 9 months of my life into it, did nothing else for 9 months but write my book. So it's a challenging path, right? So I was afraid for the last 3 years as my artist wanted to come forth, like, how do I balance these things? And here's the other thing too, because the way I was holding my business and the way I was in some ways holding my job with my clients, and this was all internalized mindset stuff, I didn't feel like I could really get in the right mind space to write, because you have to be willing to be wide open and raw. And I felt, because I was running a business and I was marketing a business, and God knows, you go on fucking Instagram, you guys, and look at all that crap, and you it's nauseating. It's, looking at life coaching on there, any kind of spiritual teacher or any kind of spiritual practices or anything like that. It's just, gag me with a spoon, as Moon Unit Zappa once said. And I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was being nailed to the cross. And I use that image and that metaphor because that's kind of what the cross represents, right? It's the materialist with the spiritualist perspective, and then you're nailed to the center of that. And that's kind of all of our experiences is that. But I was really, really feeling it and was terrified that I would never be able to be an artist again, because I had to show up in the world in a certain way, as someone who was needing to look like I had my shit together, that I was going to change and fix your life to perfection, and that my programs and courses and all that kind of stuff, has all the answers. And look, I know I do powerful work in the work we do, in the courses we've created, in the group calls we have, and the one-on-one sessions. I mean, I know when I show up in the room, transformation happens. It's pretty cool to see. and I've been super, super, super lucky that the right people have found me, and that, it's no accident that the right people find you no matter what. But because I'm a good girl and a perfectionist, and because of my codependence, which was as the fixer and the healer of the family, I really put a lot of that pressure on myself and started, and it's, I don't know if it's almost impossible not to do this. And I haven't talked to others in the healing coaching professions about their own struggle with this. And maybe I'll get a chance to do that. That would be actually really great for me to be able to do that. But we kind of start to convince ourselves that we have to be the fixers and the healers, and that no one has, that we have the answers to it all. And marketing almost works that way. Marketing almost puts you in that place. I mean, it does, right? I mean, look at toothpaste. Toothpaste will change your life, supposedly. And the problem, the difficulty, not the problem, but the difficulty with marketing is there are people out there who have real needs. And I actually have a path for them where they can work some of those needs out to get out of their own way, or to step into what they really want. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I've been doing this particular business for 7 years, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about something that just happened a few weeks ago that was just really profound. But the part of me that kind of like loves a math problem and was really good at math, saw it as a math problem, and kind of started just objectifying people. Not when I was in the room with them. I learned how to not do that, although that would creep into a little bit. But to really not be able to see them as creative, resourceful, and whole, to really, really hold that position all the time with them. And that's how I was trained as a coach. And that is certainly how I was trained as a therapist, especially through the lens of depth psychology and Jungian psychology, is I don't got any answers. I just am able to sit in a place of being that is connected to a deeper wisdom. And by creating that space for anyone I sit with, they're able to access that deeper wisdom also. And that in conversation, we can access the deeper wisdom that is right on time and is needed for them. So all these parts of me scrambling around, the artist walks into, and I've just been in a place of confusion and thinking I needed to solve it right away. And then on top of that, my husband works in the entertainment industry. And the entertainment industry has pretty much been non-existent here in LA for 2 years. And so that's been another mind blow. And then, of course, the election and all of that, right? I mean, yikes. So late last year, I started talking to 2 women who've been working with me for a while, Avery and Holly. And we decided to partner because I just knew going into my 60s, if I'm going to do this in my 60s, I can't, quote unquote, as they say, scale up my business the way I want. I just don't have the energy. I'm not 20, I'm not 30, I'm not 40, I'm not even 50. I'm not even 55 anymore. I'm going to be 62. And although I'm pretty vibrant and healthy and knock on wood, all that kind of stuff, something about this age, being in your 60s, I just don't have it in me to do all that. And so I was noticing that too. Like, wow, look at this. I've been hungry my whole life, you guys. And I was thinking, wow, my ambition is going away. My hunger to change the world in this big visionary way. I mean, I used to be super, super hungry 30 years ago for that. And so there's been this shift, consciously, but also unconsciously. And I noticed this shift starting when I had a dream on the solstice in 2022, 3 years ago. And we're coming up on the solstice now. I had a dream, And I'm going to be writing about this. So I'm excited to kind of talk it out loud a little bit first with you guys. I had a night dream where my dad came to my house, and I rarely dream about my own house. I'm normally at some sort of big event and some sort of complex, which I always laugh at because a complex is a psychological thing that you're stuck in. My venues are never my house, but I had a dream about my house, and it really was my house. It wasn't one of those dreams where it's my house, but it's not my house. And my dad comes to the door, and he's moving in with Bob and I. And he's moving in because he's retiring. And he sits down at my teeny little kitchen table. We don't have a huge house. And he's like ready to just like eat hot dogs and watch baseball for the rest of his life. And I woke up from this dream, and it was shocking. First of all, my father was the Energizer Bunny. My dad was going all the time, almost in a kind of a semi-manic way. Just, driven himself, and even in his 60s, but he had heart failure, but he was still very driven. He still had a lot to do and a lot to say, and he did multiple HBO specials in his 60s. I really don't know how he did it, but he was clearly wired differently than me. So that was amazing that he was retiring. And then, of course, I thought about it and like, is this a reflection of myself in some ways, right? That's one of the ways we look at dreams, right? Is through the personal lens of what personal association do I have? And I thought, oh, that part of me that has been ambitious my whole life and driven to equal or surpass my father is retiring also. And so I kept talking about the dream as the king. The king is retiring. The king is retiring. And that was a profound dream. It's what Jung called a big dream for me. And so that was like one little clue that was happening. And I know I've had a couple of dreams. I haven't looked in my dream journal yet because I want to write about this whole last 3 years and going through this because it's been very potent for me. And it just is this summing up of my life in some ways, this pivoting. And then I had a dream earlier last year. It wasn't but my dad wasn't in it per se, but it was somewhat there was the same kind of feeling to it. And in the dream, I come to my house and there's a big party. This time the house does not look like my house. There's a big party, and the party is happening because there's going to be a premiere of a documentary that this filmmaker had been making about me. They've been secretly filming me for a year, and they're premiering it that night. And I'm going to sit down and watch it with a bunch of people, and I have no idea what's in it. And so this is a dream about reputation and identity, because in the dream, the filmmaker says, how do you feel about that? And I say to him, well, in an hour and a half, I'll either love you. And then I grab his throat, and with a complete murderous rage in my heart, I say to him, or I'm going to fucking kill you. And I really meant it. Oh boy, did I feel it in my body in the dream. It felt kind of good, actually, to feel that kind of rage. It's one of those shadow emotions that we're not allowed to let ourselves feel. But of course, I woke up from that in a startle, like, holy fuck, what the fuck was that about? But there it was again, reputation, identity, because I felt like, oh, what did I say? Oh my God, like I'm going to be canceled. God knows I said something in, some dark humor thing or whatever. And, inside of all of us, we all have every aspect of humanity. And I thought, oh, all of my shadow is going to be shown, and I'm going to be, everyone's going to hate me, and I'm going to be ostracized and canceled and no longer relevant in the culture. So that dream was mind-blowing. And so when I was in Switzerland last summer for the Jungian pilgrimage, which I have started to write about on my Substack this week, I had the dream tended by Stephen Eisenstadt. in this place called Eranos, which is where all these amazing people went in the 20s and 30s and 40s and the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s and da, da, da. But Carl Jung used to go there for a yearly conference. And it was really when the esoteric thinking, Eastern philosophy, esoteric stuff, a lot of mythology stuff, Greek archaeology, all sorts of stuff was coming forward, and people were starting to kind of look at it. It was kind of the modern age's look at mysticism and kind of exploring that stuff. And so we did our dream tending in that room where all those people used to go. Look it up. It's called Eranos, Eranos. I'll put a link in the show notes. And so we did this dream tending of this dream, and I'm not going to go into that. But the next day, after we do a dream tending with Steve, he'll always ask, "How are you doing?" and all of that. And I started talking about that, and I started talking about the split inside of me, right? The love. I'm either going to love it or I'm going to kill you, because it's this kind of dualism inside of me. And I started talking about how he asked about feeling unsafe at some point. Why would I feel unsafe showing who I actually am in public? And I talked about how that after my dad died, my dad was a very deep, spiritual, soulful person. And both he and my mom were the people who brought me into the world, and so that I would look beneath it all the time. And, we did the I Ching in my house, and we all had a set of our own runes for oracle stuff. And, we never understood it, but we always took the information and considered it, right? Understanding that it's tapping into something bigger than us. And of course, we talk a lot about that here. In fact, my conversation with my guest next month, we talk a lot about that. But I mean, this is the stuff I was brought up in, to like kind of trust your intuition and trust synchronicity, and it was all over my life always, and makes perfect sense why I became a practicing Buddhist and loved Buddhism, because it wasn't a full on, deep dive into like angels and things like that. I mean, people have all sorts of ways of talking to the collective unconscious, or the deep intelligence field, or whatever we're accessing through our right brain. And sometimes it shows up for people as Jesus Christ or angels or whatever. But, and there's a literalization of all of that kind of stuff, which I don't tend to do. But anyway, I do know that my dad, after my dad died, I came into contact with some people who were very, very fond of my father, and they were also in the secular humanist world and also in the pretty hardcore atheist world. And I had some pretty uncomfortable encounters when I would kind of talk the way I talk about these things as a depth psychologist in the world. And I didn't quite have the language for it yet. This was 2008, so this was a while ago, 17 years ago. I didn't quite have my feet on the ground yet, and I was really very much knocked off my center with my dad's death, and was participating in another part of my psyche at the time, which I am going to write about, and I will talk about it another time. But I didn't quite know how to language all of it. And I didn't feel like I could go toe to toe with these people who were super, super rational, critical thinkers, people I respect in a lot of ways. But I felt like they were just always looking to shut the door on what I was talking about and what I had experienced. And so I started to shut the door on that too. I thought, oh, okay. Because part of me wanted to be part of that world. These were people who were smart and intelligent like my dad, and really looked up to him, and he was their hero, and it was important to me to be part of that. And like I said, I just didn't quite have the center yet to be able to stand my own ground. I was 45 when my dad died. I was still still figuring myself out in a lot of ways. And so I kind of let that beat me down and let me hide that part of me. And I started then to see my dad as only that, like how they saw him through their eyes. I mean, it always really made me laugh when I would go to some of these atheist conventions and stuff and see pictures of my dad on a t-shirt. And they would like kind of worship my dad. And I would think, where do you think the worshiping need to be with the sacred and the higher beings? Where do you think that comes from? It's built into us. It's built into this mechanism of this mind and this psyche. And so I always kind of wanted to poke into that. And so anyway, but I started seeing my dad only through their eyes. And this other part of my dad disappeared from me. And when I did my solo show, there were moments of it that I would show in the show and talked about how my dad saw me as the shaman of the family and really respected that and knew I was tapped into something that he had always dreamed of being tapped into, but couldn't be tapped into, as my mother was also. And so when I had the dream tended, the day after the dream tending, Stephen asked, how are you doing? And da-da-da-da. And I talked about my creativity and wanting to bring my voice more out into the world and to talk about how I see the world through this depth psychological lens. And we talked about feeling safe and where I felt safe. And I said, well, of course I feel safe in a room like this and in a circle like this. And then I kind of just put an offhand kind of remark like, well, my dad would never be in a circle like this. And I really felt it when I said it. And then we moved on to the next person, and we're sitting there, and we're sitting in this beautiful room with like all these open windows. We're right on this place called Lake Maggiore, just outside of Ascona, Switzerland. We're just on the border of Italy. It's freaking idyllic, you guys. It's gorgeous. And we're sitting there, and we're moved on to the next person, and a huge dragonfly comes flying into the space. And dragonfly is my dad. I don't know if any of you have this, but I know when my mother died, a hummingbird came to me, and I knew immediately it was my mother. And the same thing with after my dad died, a dragonfly. I don't live near bodies of water where there are dragonflies, but a dragonfly came into my backyard and like just hovered in front of me. And I thought, okay, Dad, here you are. I don't understand that. It's not like his consciousness was in the dragonfly. Look, guys, I don't know. There's this other kind of knowing where you're like, oh, it's my father. Like, however that works, I don't know how that works. That's the non-rational part of me. But as I work with dreams and symbols and things, and here I am right now, even I'm trying to rationalize it to you guys. I don't got any answers for you. All I know, it was my dad. So we're sitting there in Aranos, just did the dream thing, just said this thing about my dad, and this fucking dragonfly comes into the room. And it's huge. It's got a huge wingspan. I've never seen a dragonfly this big. It was so cool. And it's circling around the room. And you know how like everyone, like when like a bird comes into a room or something like that, and everyone's suddenly like nervous because you think, oh, fuck, it's going to hit a window and it's going to die and we have to witness that or whatever. And oh, shit. So we're all kind of like, we're paying attention to what the person's saying. And yet I'm like watching this dragonfly, like it needs to get out of here. It needs to be okay. All of that. And I also was like, hi, Dad. Like George just entered the room. Dragonfly spins around a bunch of times and then it leaves. And then I just kind of close my eyes and I'm like, okay, Father is here now. Dad's here now. And I'm just feeling him in my heart. And in the circle that we were in, there happened to be an empty chair next to me. And as I'm closing my eyes and I'm feeling this energy, I suddenly see my father, a younger version of my father, in his, I'd say 30s. So that would be in the late 60s, early 70s. That version of my dad. Standing next to me and says to me, Kelly, I'm not the one who kept me out of this circle. It's been you. And then he sits down in the chair next to me. And it was this radical shift inside of me. And I was really, really deeply affected by it. And I close my eyes and I check in at that circle pretty regularly, and he's still sitting there. And so what did he mean by that to me? If I looked at it as a dream and I used my own personal associations, is that I am the one who kicked him out of that chair. I'm the one who kicked him out of that chair right after he died, a little bit after he died, and started deciding that he was not that person, and I didn't want to have to explain who that part of him was to these other people, and didn't really have the language for it. But I always knew in my heart who my father was to me and who he was in my personal life and his personal life. And I just felt like that was unnecessary to have to explain that to people, and maybe none of their business. So I felt that. And I felt like, yeah, it was me. I did kick that part of him out of my own circle, because I guess I needed to at that time also. And plus I was really dealing with his rational mind at that time, and his darkness, and his, what some people would call his cynicism about the world. I did have to travel in his feet for a while. You know, when people hold a space in our life and hold a perspective in our life and then they're gone, it behooves us to step into their shoes and kind of see the world through their eyes also, because it's a shadow part of us, right? Family systems works that way. We each hold perspectives that the other person can't or won't hold. And my dad certainly held that dark position, but rational and real also, I get it. So there was that piece of it. And the other piece is that it was time for the masculine part of me, what we call the animus in Jungian psychology, to come and sit down in the circle and to be in the conversation of what it's like to work with the being part of ourselves, the right brain, the feminine, the yin, the heroine's journey, all the different labels we put on this, but it is this relatedness side, not the hero side, but the more relatedness side, the receiving side, the open, the non-defining side, the being side, which, you know, is potent. The feeling side, the feeling function is what Jung called it, right? He had the thinking function and the feeling function. And to bring that part of myself home. And so that is what happened. That was in July of 2024. And so that was, I came home from that and really did feel the more of the angst about my business and how am I going to do this, and the artist in me, and really the one who's very interested in championing this non-ordinary intelligence, this right brain way of seeing the world, the artist way of seeing the world, and that I was going to lean into it more. But then the part of me that worries about, well, how do I sustain a business on that? And, just all the conversation around that, way bigger conversation than I want to have with you guys today. And so I've been in that. I've been in that soup, and really thankful that my partners, Holly and Avery, have come into my life. And I mean, they were already in my life, but really came in to say, let's, the three of us, share the burden of the construction and building and sustaining of the business part. And so that Kelly, can really do this work, and they too. And then about 5 or 6 weeks ago, we did a weekend retreat, and it was called the Villains Retreat. And it was created by Holly Payberg, who's now the creative writing person. She's written all the writing curriculum inside of Humans on the Verge. We now have 2 silos. We have a kind of a writing exploration process, writing process kind of academy school, you could say. And then we have this kind of soul courage side where we do the transformational, really transforming your identity work is really what it is. And so Holly had created this weekend virtual retreat, and she's this kind of writing witch. She like writes all these prompts and sends you into that kind of right brain state, and then you access and create from that place. She's very good at helping people just drop into process. And she did this in order so that people who are writing fiction can really get into the eyes and body of their villains, their antagonists, and write from that perspective as a character. Because the stronger your antagonists are, the more likely you're going to have a great story, because the protagonist is really going to be put through the paces. And of course, I already do this work. In coaching world, we call it saboteur work. And so I did the other half of it, which was people who are writing memoir or personal storytelling or working on their personal lives, creating this character from the part of them that is the opposing force in their life, right? And she does a bunch of stuff to kind of help you land in the space with this stuff. And lo and behold, I did this work with her, and she has us name the character and start to kind of flesh it out and everything like that. And lo and behold, this male figure came forward for me. And his name is Roger, the rational rock star. And what I was looking to identify and to give language to and to find the perspective of is the part of me that fights against my depth psychology self and really is super, super ambitious and thinks that I have to, be a rock star in order to be worth anything. And so this figure, this character came forward, and we were able to write from this character for the weekend and really see what their wants are and their needs and everything like that. And it was an exercise in beautiful internal family systems work. If you're into IFS, I saw this kind of clear part of me that has been ruling my life probably since I was 3 years old, since I went to school and saw that I could be smart, but also started ruling my life once I saw my dad on TV and realized that in order to, this was, remember, the 3-year-old version of myself, and I was maybe just around 3 or under 3 the first time I saw my dad on TV. This is the part of me that as that little young mind saw, it's like, oh, if I'm going to matter to this man, I have to be as big and shiny as that audience, or I have to be equal to that audience, or I have to be his peer in order to be able to do that. And of course, all of that is not true. My father adored me. I was the pride and joy of his life. People come up to me and say to me, oh my God, every time I met your dad, he was always so proud of you and always talked about you. And I was like, that's not the world I lived in. I lived in my own head where Roger was driving the fucking bus of my life. And I've wrestled with this my entire life and had never named it in such a clear way, and was just so grateful for Holly to be able to do the work that she does. She's really a genius at how she does this, and being able to incorporate it into our own larger Humans on the Verge work that we do with just people who aren't writing fiction, So had this huge epiphany, and finally understood what the animus was, and this aspect of me that has been running me my whole life, the part that felt it needed to be part of Hollywood, and yet I always resisted that. All of that stuff. I'm going to be writing, like I said, all about this stuff. And then 2 weeks later, Holly and Avery and I go to Ghost Ranch in northern New Mexico because we're leading a retreat with mostly our long-term clients, like people we've never met in person. We've only met them on Zoom. We've met a couple of them in person, but we've never been together. And I planned this thing a year ago and tried to do it 2 years ago. And we went to Ghost Ranch. And Ghost Ranch, you guys, is where Georgia O'Keeffe went to in northern New Mexico and moved to and began painting in the 20s, I believe, late 20s, early 30s. And then she ended up buying our own place up the road in Abiquiu and living there and painting there the rest of her life. And this is one of those places where the land changes you. It is absolutely so stunning and so gorgeous that you cannot help but leave your modern civilized persona behind and let the place presence and resonate inside of every cell of your body. And so the minute we drove into the region, I knew that we were in the right place, and I'd followed my intuition and made the right move. And we had 10 people in our retreat, and it was gorgeous. And I decided that week, because we were going to do all embodiment stuff. So we've been on Zoom. I've not been able to do any of the embodiment stuff I've been trained in. I haven't figured out how to do that. I've been stuck in this I'm a life coach kind of a place. And like I said earlier, stuck in that, like, oh, I need to have the answers or create the right structure or whatever it is. Like, I just am constantly, I'm such a fucking straight A student, goody fucking two shoes inside. And then there's Roger, my rational rock star, who needs to get it out of the park no matter what. I just felt I needed to be from that thing. And I just decided, no, I'm just going to do really, really I'm just going to kind of create the space. We're already in it, and just let these souls do exactly what they know and need to do. And even decided to take my mask off as being the quote unquote leader, or whatever the fuck that means. I knew I had to lead enough to hold safe space for everyone's psyche, but I knew that also the land was doing that for us. And I just decided to bring my own process to the circle. And I did. And it was a profound experience for me. Profound experience the entire week, because I just kept letting go of my control of it all and letting everyone's inner wisdom lead them to what they needed to do. And I am blown away about what happened there for every single person, Holly, Avery, myself, and the 10 people that we held the space for. It was like trusting, it's like being an artist and trusting the process, being a performer and trusting the moment, being an athlete and being in the zone, in the flow. It was just all of that the entire time. And we all fed ourselves very deeply on the space. And it really, really showed me that it is time for me to take my mask off, to be just myself here on this podcast, in my writing, in my teaching, even in my marketing. And I hate that word. Someone please give me another word for it. But in my communication about what we offer, what we do. And so I sent my mailing list out this week, an email called, My Identity Crisis, and talked a lot about this change inside of me. And I feel like a new woman. I feel like there's a wholeness inside of me that has not been around for a while. And I've been working with this inner figure of mine, Roger, the last few weeks. And he's settling in. He certainly shows up and gets worried about things and feels that he still needs to be a rock star sometimes. But even that is shifting. And so I just wanted to share all of that, because this is me going forward. This is me now. This is who I've always been. And I'm just at 62, tired of pretending. And it's not like I was pretending necessarily in a deceptive way, but we're all pretending all the time. And even, we're all trying to show up in some way. And I just know that the only thing that I know how to do as an artist, and because it's the reason I write memoir, it's the reason why Spalding Gray and people like Karen Finley and David Sedaris and Anne Lamott are my mentors from afar away, is because they're great constructors of their own life story, but they're also willing to just be fucking messy and to own the messiness of the human condition. And I know that's kind of why I'm here is to do that. And this is just another layer of that. So I don't know how any other way to be a human on the verge. All I know is that verge for me is always about shedding the little bit of skin that the ego starts to form. It's like the skin on milk. It's the protective layer. And all I know how to do is to keep shedding that. And strangely enough, I do it in public. And the reason I do it in public is because I feel like that's my job, is to do it in public. And I no longer, no part of me cares about being a rock star, or if the rationalists want to roll their eyes at me. It's just, I'm in the fuck it part of my life, you know. And I know my dad got here too as a performer. He got here earlier. I think being a man in our culture, it might be easier to do that. And of course, he had a great wave of success and felt very loved by his audience in public. And he was always a person that said fuck it from day one, whereas I was a complete codependent. Holy shit. How do I feel? What chameleon shape do I need to be in now? But I think, you know, the world the way it is, and with Trump having come in, and just the insanity of this man and these times, if there's not another time to say fuck it, I don't know what is. And so I invite all of you to ponder what I've pondered today. Would love to hear from all of you. You can always reach me at kelly@humansontheverge.com. I would love to hear what you got from this episode, how it hit you, how you're walking through something similar or terrified to walk through it. Just genuinely curious about how others are doing this, what it's like to be in your early 60s. Maybe there's some part of you that's also the Roger, the rational rock star. So yeah, just want to be in conversation with you about all of this, really looking for that. And part of what I'm doing is I'm really looking, I've built this pretty incredible little online space and community. First of all, I just want to let you know that I'm going to start doing more things live in person. It's a must. I have to be in the room with people. I will always do Zoom stuff, and we will always do online stuff because that's the world we live in too. So I'm looking to do more stuff in Los Angeles. I'm looking to come to cities and do stuff. I don't know how to gather lots of people in spaces. People think I'm like, can just snap my fingers and get 200 people in a room. I cannot do that. I do not know how to do that. But if you do, and you have some sort of organization or some sort of a group that gathers, whether it's spiritual or artistic or whatever it is, it could even be around your business, and are looking to have a conversation like this, I would love to be able to hold the space for that conversation for you and those that gather. I've got lots of fun stuff to do in person with people, cool stuff that will drop you into your body and your deep wisdom pretty damn quickly. That's what I love doing in these spaces. I once brought one of these exercises that I ended up doing with the people at Ghost Ranch. I brought one of those once to a secular humanist convention. And Dr. Richard Dawkins walked out of the room right before I started. And it was pretty telling moment in my life. But the people who stayed really enjoyed it, really saw that it has nothing to do with woo-woo or goopiness. So I'm looking to come out into the world more. So if that's something you would like to help co-host with me, I would love that, or help me organize or produce. I would be deeply, deeply, deeply honored to be a part of that. And what was I going to say about this? Oh, I completely forgot. Okay. Anyway. My online community. I have this thing, when we reshuffled everything in my online space, we had this kind of level called the tribe. And we knew we needed to have it. And but we didn't quite know what to do with it. And then I spoke to Holly and Avery on the way. We took a car ride back. We drove from LA to Santa Fe together. On the way back, I said, why don't we make the tribe really the place where people who listen to my podcast, who want to talk more about these subjects or talk about the subject each month, and get to be in a group call with me, can come and be. And so we are lowering the price on that. We are going to change what it's about. It's going to be about people who want to be in community around this podcast and these topics. And each month, what we will do is we will take a topic from the podcast and deepen into it. I will try to make it line up with the podcasts we just did the month before, so we can then gather and do that. And it'll most likely be the first Wednesday of the month. Traditionally, that has been when that call is. Of course, I'm traveling the next couple of months, so I can't do the July one, the first Wednesday of the month. So I will let you know, though, and I will put some links in the show notes of this so that you can find your way into this space. I'm still trying to figure out a price that works for both you guys, that is very reasonable, and also help support our work and my work in the world. So there's that. So I really, really want to build community from this podcast and from these conversations, because this is my work. This is my life's work. And I'm no longer hiding all of it. I probably haven't been hiding any of it, but I felt like I needed to hide it. And I think that's the difference that's happening now, is that I no longer feel the need to hide all of myself. And that Roger, the rational rock star, can come along with me and know that no matter what, I mattered. I mattered to my mom and my dad, of course, and that he mattered to them too. So that is what I have this month for you in the Ponderama. Super vulnerable for me, super personal, but really, really exactly what I wanted for this conversation with you, and what I needed and what I need. So I just want to thank you for listening, if you're still here at the end. And let's continue the conversation. You can find me on Blue Sky. You can find me on Instagram. You can even find me on Twitter. I'm not there a lot in most of those places, but I do check in, so you can always find me there. And like I said, you can find me through my humansontheverge.com website, which we've just created a new one. Very excited about that. And you can always write me at kelly@humansontheverge.com if you have any questions about my work or my program, or any thing you want to say about these episodes. Okay? All right. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I appreciate every single one of your time and attention. I know how precious it is these days. And I hope you connect to your presence and your being this week, this month, and give yourself some time to really let the land and the soul of the land fill you up, because that's really where our living happens. It's where life is. All right? I will see you soon. Thank you.